And now, here's another episode of On Campus with your host, Coach Mark.
Here I am on the field at ECU, bringing you another podcast on campus. Hey, it's Mark Helsel. I'm the host of the show today, and man, are you in for a treat. Just spoke with Coach Palumbo for an hour, and in this podcast, we really dig deep into the recruiting process. He's one of the top recruiters in the entire country. He's got the resume to back it up because ECU is doing phenomenal things. So whatever he's doing, recruiting is working, and you're going to get to hear all about it in today's podcast. So let's get right at it with Coach Palumbo here at ECU. Coach Palumbo, Thank you for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you coming down to hang out with us here at East Carolina.
Well, I'll tell you what, you and I go back a long way.
Sure do.
We were talking a little earlier, way back. I'm thinking it was 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to figure out myself as well, but I couldn't remember if it was my time at George Mason or if it was UCF, ECU. Try to figure out where it all took. Got rolling, but I certainly appreciate the relationship.
Well, a long history for us, and I have to tell you, when I decided to come up with this podcast idea, I made a list of the guys that were like the no-brainers, and you were in that top list.
I appreciate it. You've had some awesome coaches, so I appreciate you including me along.
I'm blessed to know these guys, but I've had great conversations, a lot of head coaches, and we're talking about a lot of things. But in today's podcast, as you and I have talked about, I really want to focus the meat of this on the recruiting side, because parents and players and even coaches are watching these, and I think there's a lot of misinformation about what goes into the recruiting side. So that's where I want to focus. But before we get to that, I want to talk about your background.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, I've already given you an illustrious introduction.
I appreciate
which
that.
you deserve.
Yeah, forward, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back. Let's start as you as a player, then a young coach, now an experienced coach. Talk about the evolution of your career.
Sure. So played at George Mason University up in Fairfax, Virginia for longtime head coach Billy Brown. He just finished up his, I think, 41st year before he retired just recently. But fortunate to play for him there. And I thought during my playing time, one thing I always appreciated for him was just his ability to let us play the game. Kind of obviously there to help us and coach us, but kind of let us play through the failure and grow as a player. And that's something I reflect on a lot as a coach now of, try to put myself back in that freshman year and put myself back in that senior year, right? And just seeing how he allowed us to kind of grow through that. So got an opportunity to play there for 4 years, and then went on and played a little bit of pro ball briefly with the San Francisco Giants before coming back, and actually started out, left spring training, and my first coaching job was actually at high school. So, Bishop O'Connell in Arlington, Virginia, and a second baseman that I played with in college, his brother was an assistant there, said, hey man, come on, and got into some substitute teaching and coaching high school baseball, and was working summer camp that summer, and at the time, the head coach over at Notre Dame, Sean Stifler, was the assistant at George Mason, and walked up to me at camp and said, hey, our assistant coach is gonna go back to teaching, and we need to hire another assistant. Anybody you think would have interest? I said, I'll take it. Let's do it. So I ended up hopping right into the positional player coach kind of role there, second assistant at George Mason, and fortunate enough, Coach Stifler got another opportunity at VCU that summer, and I don't know if Coach Brown wanted to promote me at the time, but I guess he took a chance on me, which I really appreciate, and got a chance to be a young recruiting coordinator at 23, and certainly reflect back and thought I knew everything, and realized I didn't know much of anything. So
now, that's interesting, because there aren't many recruiting coordinators at 23 years old. That's got to be maybe close to a record. So was there a challenge with you with that tight age? You were close in age to the kids you were recruiting.
Very close. Yeah, they're looking back, I didn't It was unique, right? Yeah. There were players that I was coaching that I had played with, plenty of them, right? So then later on in my time at George Mason, I actually coached my younger brother there as well, which was another uniqueness to it. But I just really felt like Coach Brown gave us the autonomy as assistants to kind of navigate those things on our own. And I think for a lot of parents and players out there that I hear it all the time. They want to coach. Yeah. They want to get into coaching. Right. And my advice would be the best thing you can do if you would like to get into coaching is be a player that leads, be a player that is about the culture, be a player that at the end of your career, the coach that you're playing under is going to look up and say, hey, that's a person that I would bring onto my staff. And, I think a lot of times you hear that and it's like, well, are you that type of player, right? Exactly. And so, but that would be something, a little bit of piece of advice I'd pass along to some guys out there that want to get into coaching is make sure you're leading your team, in a way that the coach would appreciate. So, but there was a uniqueness to it for sure, coaching those guys, and was there for 3 years, and then got an opportunity to go down to UCF with Coach Terry Rooney, and obviously Coach Godwin that I work under here now. So he and I were the two assistants there, and really took over a program there at UCF that had in a great area, right, in Orlando, Central Florida there, and great area of baseball, but had really kind of struggled over the last couple of years. And so it was a neat experience getting into the state of Florida. Hadn't been down there, hadn't recruited down there a whole lot. So just kind of navigating that. Obviously, Coach Rooney and Coach Godwin had come over from LSU. So just the experience learning from two guys that had put together the #1 recruiting class in the country at LSU, had just finished up at Omaha. And again, you look back and you reflect back on it now as an older coach, and it's just, you appreciate those opportunities that maybe at the time you're just trying to go to work, right, and try to help build UCF up, but you get an opportunity just to learn and from guys that are at the top of what we do. And so again, at the age of 25, 26, very fortunate to have had that experience for sure.
Well, that was about the time when my son Christian was starting to get recruited, and I think he's 9th or 10th grade, and Coach Godwin and you guys were down there, and I got that's an advantage I have. I got to know you guys as a dad. Right. You guys are recruiting my son, so I got that, and then of course I was running a travel program and trying to help our guys get on to the next level. And I just always remember you guys as being so professional, so paying attention to the details, asking all the right questions, following up, and I just appreciate your body of work. So you and Coach Godwin moved from there to here.
That's
and you've been here how long?
Going into this is our 10th season together.
10th season. Wow.
So Coach briefly went up to Ole Miss for a little bit. I went to VCU for 3 years, and then when he was hired here in the summer of 2014, called me up, and here we are 10 years later. That's it, right? And that's really what, as you know, that's a pretty neat sidebar to everything that we do, right? As the relationships that are developed along the way, and again, you never know who you're impacting, right? Along the way, and how that may find you back later on. Yeah.
Well, I always look at you guys sort of like people are putting together what I call the dream team, the coaching staff of it's me and you and this guy, and we get to do this, and then we get to go play guys that are doing the same thing. And you've had enormous success here at ECU. So tell me a little bit about life at ECU, and I'd love to hear your take on what's making this work without secret sauce being given away or anything.
Yeah, no problem.
What's the success formula here?
Well, I think it starts with the university, right? And every place that I've ever worked at and had the opportunity to coach at, they all have their own niches, right? That I feel like make them what they are, and as a recruiting coordinator especially, and also obviously a baseball coach, you want to figure out what the strengths of that place are and how can we utilize those to help us in recruiting. And so here at East Carolina, you have so much that it makes it a really neat process in trying to bring the guys here. So you got a university, 29,000 students. It's a really, really neat campus, and this community, right? It has grown a whole lot in the 10 years that I've been here. The city of Greenville, but it is geared around athletics at East Carolina, and I think that's what starts and makes it so special. When you start to get into the athletics piece, on top of getting a fantastic degree, is it is football Saturdays are neat. You got 50,000 people. There's tailgating everywhere. But if you ask this fan base, what is the number one sport that they love on this campus, it's going to be baseball. And I think that's unique. There's only so many schools out there that I would consider a baseball first school.
I agree.
Really, there's a couple that I would lump into that. Even some of the best programs in the country, they're still football or basketball schools, right? So that is something that I think we use to our advantage here, right? When we're in recruiting, and you add in just a fan base that is incredible. And really, I mean, that's, to me, what makes this place. It's the number one thing that makes this place special is a Tuesday night game. You're, playing in-state competition. You're going to have 6,000 people here, maybe 7. And, you go back to our 22 Super Regional that we hosted here on campus, and they say there were 6,000. I think there were about 10.
Well, I've experienced it. I mean, when Christian was getting recruited, we came down here on several visits, and you've grown it way past that. But I remember those fans were just rabid, kind of, and I mean that in a positive way. That they love their baseball here.
They do, and you talk about 3,000 here in the grandstands, and the way the stadium is set up too, I think makes it unique. I mean, there's a handful of places in the country that are going to have a couple more thousand fans at their games, but the uniqueness of our place, where the fans are right on top of the field, and then you go down around the short. We have a low wall, so they're all from foul pole to foul pole. You got the jungle, right, as it's known, out in left center field, and the student section out in right field. So it's just a unique mix, and they're right on top, and they're an incredible fan base, and they certainly, all you have to do is go back and look at our home records here of the last several years and see how much of an advantage this place is and how much of a really, really unique game day atmosphere it is. So, I think along with all the things that go into the day-to-day operations of our program, which I know we'll get into here in a little bit, but I think you kind of add all those things together, and it's a really, really unique formula that, Coach Godwin and the rest of us here as a staff have been able to take advantage of and hopefully continue to grow it even further.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Now, you're a very humble guy, but getting the right players here is a huge part of that pie as well. We're going to talk a lot about the recruiting side. That's really where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the kind of players and how you recruit them and all that. But just for our listeners, and this is not meant to be a pitch for ECU, but I think it's important that they hear, like, what is your theme here? Like, is there a foundational thing that you would say, at ECU baseball? What do you feel like you stand for?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we'll get into the individual people here when we get into the recruiting segment. But I mean, really, it's going to be about hard work. Yeah. I mean, that's really, if you look at just our track record over time, it's we want to be known as a place that is blue collar, and you're going to come here and you're going to get a great degree. Yeah. We're going to have expectations in the classroom that our guys sit in the front of the classroom, right? They interact with their professors. They introduce themselves on the first day of classes, and we want them to know that they're baseball players. Yeah. And then we want to know that, hey, with that comes responsibility, and it is their job to continue to uphold that and do their best work in the classroom. Yeah. In the community, right? As I mentioned, this community is geared around athletics, and they love baseball. Yeah. So our players, they are, for lack of a better term, they're kind of celebrities here in town, and people know who they are, right? And they're signing tons of autographs, and it's a really, really unique thing for them. But again, with that comes responsibility to do the right things, and I think the same goes for the baseball. And when you show up here, we want attention to detail, we want your best effort, we want you to work, and I think the hard part sometimes as coaches is, do we have the discipline to uphold, right? We make sure that they're accountable for that on a daily basis, and sometimes that's not easy, right? When you have young guys that they don't know how to work yet. They don't know what it takes to be successful. And so it's our job as coaches to, right, on the recruiting end, make sure we're bringing in players that fit those things, which again, we'll expand upon that further. But but once they're here, this is the expectation, and you're going to be held accountable. And the sooner that you understand and adapt to those things, the smoother the transition becomes, right? But that's what we want to be known as a place that, but we're also going to guide them, and we're going to love them along the way, and we're going to continue to help them to grow and reach their potential, and that's in all areas, in the classroom, right? As people, right? In the community, and certainly with our player development on the baseball field.
Yeah, well, I know you guys walk the walk. I mean, a lot of people can talk the talk, but you guys walk the walk, and I know firsthand because course, Christian played for Coach Godwin at Ole Miss there, and he speaks so fondly of that time with Coach Godwin specifically, and now you guys are doing here. So, little segue, just the whole idea of a recruiting coordinator. I don't think a lot of people understand the magnitude of that job, and also all the other things you do as well. So in this first segment, we only have about 5 minutes left, but give us an idea of life as a recruiting coordinator.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's when I think of showing up at work on a daily basis, I think the first thing the recruiting coordinator has to do a little bit differently is think about the future.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think head coaches do the same thing, but they have a whole lot more on a daily basis to make sure that they're continuing to operate with the players that are on your campus and the current team, and maximizing those guys in all those areas that we just talked about, because they're responsible for all of it, not just the baseball results. So I think you got to think a little bit bigger picture, as the recruiting coordinator, and continue to make sure that you see the vision for the teams in the future years. We'll get into this more, I'm sure, later, but that's obviously changing a little bit in how things go. But I think then you have the office side. And what job responsibilities have you been given as the recruiting coordinator to also manage on a daily basis, So in my particular, every head coach probably lays it out a little bit differently for their staff, but here I handle the scheduling of our games. You handle on you have areas of, I kind of think about it, recruiting, office responsibilities, and then team player development, and those are kind of the three areas that I try to break it down into. So here at our place, it's a whole lot of things within the office on a daily basis, making sure that just small things, you're handling the housing of the players, all of these little things that go into the job that I know a lot of people think, well, you just show up at 3 o'clock and go to practice, you know what I mean?
It was just that simple.
That's right. I get that all the time, a little bit more than that, but we'll get into that later on, So, but then when it comes to the side of coaching your players, again, every recruiting coordinator maybe in a little bit of a different position, what they handle. Here at East Carolina, I handle, kind of oversee the team defensive side of things. I coach the infielders specifically within that. And then I kind of handle on the offensive side of the short game. So base running, bunting, and then just kind of assists, the other guys offensively, Coach Lartigue and Brian Packard, who's back now helping us as a student assistant. Those guys do a great job, and Coach kind of, obviously his background is a great hitting coach, so he oversees those guys. So we have a nice offensive team. So really here is set up quite well, because we can kind of branch off, I can take guys and do bunting and base running. Those guys are focused on the hitting piece. So offensively, we can really work as a group. So I think ours is a little bit of a unique setup in that way, but it works really well for us.
So Coach, we talked about your background. We talked about life at ECU. We talked about your title as recruiting coordinator. But I know for sure that our listeners want us to drill down into the recruiting world. Because that is your job.
That's right.
And as I mentioned in the beginning, when I look at your resume, you're definitely one of the top recruiters. The stats back it up, but even from my personal experience, you are definitely one of the top recruiters / evaluators in the country.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So for our listeners, this is the guy you want to be listening to. And by the way, side note, you guys are the guys that have the final say. You're the one, quote unquote, with the checkbook in the back of your pocket. You're the one that gives scholarships. So I love that we're able to get information from you and pass it on to the parents. So let's start with your job is to win here at ECU. So you got to go out and watch high school kids and JUCO kids and transfer kids to find guys that help you win here. Now, you're doing it at a tremendous level. So let's start there. What are some of the things you love to see when you're out watching kids? I always say you guys want to find good players.
Sure.
You have to scratch guys off your list, and we're going to talk about that too.
Right.
But what do you love? What do you love to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts for me with if you get into it, you have to identify what works at your school.
Yeah.
And I think that was the unique thing here when we got going back in summer of 14, right? You hit the ground running, and, East Carolina, great tradition. And, here comes Coach Godwin, our brand new first-time head coach. And he and I were assistants together. But now you're talking about getting here and working together, and he's my boss. And he's never had his own program, right? So right away, it's like, let's just go find great players, right? Let's get this thing back on track, and let's go find great players. And so you kind of hit the ground running. We've now been here 10 years, and it probably took about 2 to 3 years before I fully realized that, hey, the kids that are coming, it can't just be about the talent. It's got to be about the type of player, the personality, the mentality, right? You talked about what we want the foundation to be here at East Carolina. Well, that took us a few years to figure that out. And it took me some time as a recruiting coordinator to figure out who's going to work with Coach Godwin well, right? So I think at first you have to kind of identify, right, who are you working for?
So when you say work with Coach, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but you work with Coach Godwin well, what you're talking about, if I understand you correctly, is there's a personality, there's a feel, a theme here. And just because somebody's talented doesn't mean they're going to fit into your culture here.
100%.
What are some of the culture things?
That's right. The intangibles, right, that you want to get into, right? So you start to look for guys, again, that can show up and work hard every day.
Yeah.
And so that to me is, I think I see it all the time when I'm on the phone with players, right, and they're recruiting, and even ones that commit to us, right? So I'm on the phone with them, and I call them, and what you doing? I'm working out. I'm working out. Awesome. Sounds great. Sounds great. And then they get here for summer school, and they get into our workouts, and they were working out.
Yeah.
But they just didn't know how to work out at the level that it takes to be successful, right, as a top 10 program in the country.
Right.
And that's okay. That's normal, right? But you do want to make sure that they have the intangible piece where they're up for that, right? They want that. They're looking for that. And those are the ones that are going to succeed earlier, right? It doesn't mean that you can't come into our program and have a learning curve. A lot of them do. But at the end of the day, the more they have those intangibles of hey, I want to work, this is going to be tough, right? To be great at something, anything, you have to work very hard, right? And I try to tell the guys, there's 300 baseball teams. Realistically, there's probably 30 that can win the national championship on any given year. How do you expect to win the national championship if you don't outwork 30 of the top programs in the country? Right. And so those are the types of players, those are the types of characteristics, guys that handle adversity well. You're going to come as a freshman. You're going to fail. I mean, we've had Connor Norby that played for us, played second base, hardly played as a freshman. He's one of the best AAA players in baseball. He just can't get up because the Orioles are so deep in the infield, right? So Alec Burleson came in. He had some of those intangibles. He was a player that stood out here in our program early as a freshman because he had all of those intangibles at the highest level. To no surprise, he's playing for the Cardinals in the outfield, right? So you can kind of see those things. Now, those are unique guys, right? We had kind of both ends of the spectrum. One that came in, right, and was ready to be productive right away and go play. One that had to kind of learn our culture, learn that effort, learn what it takes to show up, and he'll come back now and he'll tell the guys, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready as a freshman, but just keep listening, just keep doing, just keep showing up, just continue to grind through it. And the coaches have your best interest in mind, and you'll reach your potential if ultimately, right, you buy into it. Now, he was super talented as well, but at the same time, it's cool to see those two different experiences. So those are the things that I would just continue, right, as parents, worry less about their swing, worry less about their pitching mechanics, worry less about the results, and worry more with the approach. Worry more with if they want to be great at it, right? And now this has to come from the kid, right? This can't come from the parent wanting that for them. But if your son is engaged in baseball, loves it, this is his passion, don't get so caught up in the results on a daily basis. Get caught up with, does he have a great plan in place for his development from a strength and conditioning standpoint? Is he doing the right things from a nutrition standpoint? Is he doing the right things from a sleep standpoint, right? And we're talking specifically baseball here, but those are the things, that's where you see the guys grow and make jumps. And so at the end of the day, the talent level is what it is. And I think some parents need to understand, when we go out and watch baseball games, there are some players strictly from a talent standpoint that we look up at this particular university, right, as a top 10 school in the country, that they just aren't going to be quite talented enough to play at our level, and that's okay. Right. That's okay. It's about finding the right fit for you to excel. Right. Doesn't mean they wouldn't be in 4 or 5 years. Right. But at the moment, it isn't exactly where it needs to be. It's those other things that I mentioned: the work ethic, the weightlifting, right? The development from a baseball standpoint, but putting yourself in the right position on a daily basis to get better. Right. And so, those are the things, right? We go out and we watch games, playing with energy. I mean, just playing the game with energy, playing the game with enthusiasm. I show up at Lake Point and I'm watching a ball game. If you have energy and enthusiasm, you usually stand out. Yeah. And so even if you are a guy that's kind of that fringe talent guy that I'm looking up and but he fits our culture. He fits our place, right? I like he's 6'2" and he's thin. Well, maybe we get him in our weight room, right? And he has that. He'll succeed in that weight room, and he'll succeed in getting stronger because I can tell the guy has a passion for the game. Right. And so, I tell our committed guys, you guys go play at Lake Point for a week at the WWBA or PBR or whatever, in Marietta with the WWBA now, and you're there, you're playing 7 games in 7 days. If you play longer, you play in 10. So, do the math for me. You got 7 innings. You're getting 2 ground balls, let's say, per in between innings, and you're getting 14, 15 ground balls a game. Well, that's you play 10 games. That's 150 ground balls. If you field that ball at shortstop and you stand straight up and you throw half of them away and you're not hitting the guy in the chest, you're not moving your feet, you're not playing with your hands, that was 150 opportunities that you had to get better than the other players that are in that tournament that are not going to do it. So if you go about those things, man, it doesn't have to be game speed with your feet and your hands. Take a little off your arm, right? So you're not, wearing down over the course of the week, but use those reps. If you do that and I'm watching the game and you're a good player, you're going to stand out amongst all the other better players.
That's an interesting point. You're literally watching them in between innings, and you talked about results. So you could go to a kid, correct me if I'm wrong, you could go see a kid. He's got talent. He's playing with energy. He's a great teammate. He's working in between innings, and he goes 0 for 4 with 3 punch-outs, and you still like him.
Well, I can tell you what, if he's not doing those other things and he goes 0 for 3, 0 for 4, I'm not coming back.
Right. But it's like, it's not just the results.
Well,
and that's where I think the parents and players sometimes, because it's a game of failure, and there's going to be some games. I can turn on the TV tonight and watch major leaguers have lousy nights at the plate, but they're the best in the world.
No question. And that's the uniqueness about our game, right? Yeah. And backtracking a little bit, usually if I'm there to watch a particular player, it's because I've either seen him previously, he's been recommended to me from a coach, which is a lot of those, right, are us following up on leads that we've been given from people we trust, like yourself or other travel coaches, high school coaches. And so we know there's a background of him being a good player. Right. And so we show up, and to your point, they have a game that maybe they'd like to not have again, but we know, we've been told, hey, no, this player, and it may be, he goes 0 for 3, but we see the bat speed. Right. He fouled off 3 pitches along the way and had great at-bats and handled the failure after the fact and got out there at shortstop, ran out on the field, showed energy, took his ground balls, right? And I could tell shortstop, but he's still a really good defender, right? And so these are the things, the pieces to the puzzle, and I think every recruiting coordinator, every coach that's out there is a little bit different in how they evaluate it and how you do it. But again, those are attributes that I know when they get to our campus that's what we're going to be holding them accountable for. So if they're already doing it, this transition is going to be easy, and then we're going to get them into our culture, get them into our system, get them into how we play the game, and do we feel like that fits right on that team the next 3-4 years, whatever it may be. And that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle when you look at, right, you go into my office and I got teams laid out for 3-4 years, right? Because at the end of the day, in order to be done it long enough now, in my opinion, in order to be a successful team, right, we have a pretty good idea now of what works here at East Carolina.
Right.
And if we can kind of put these pieces together, right, then for that particular team. Now, next year's team may look a little bit different than the team in 16 or 17. The strengths might be a little bit different. Right. But at the end of the day, we feel like as a staff, it puts us in a position to, right, win an AAC regular season championship, host a regional, host a super regional, go to Omaha and win a national championship, right, on paper. So that's kind of how we do it, but it starts with, again, some of those key foundational things that we look for, and then when we're out watching players, are they exemplifying the things that are going to fit our foundation?
Right. Hey, it's Coach Mark here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. We're going to get right back to it, but I wanted to remind you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It helps us immensely. We want to keep providing great content with these college coaches who are so gracious with their time to provide information for you. Whether you're a coach, a player, or a parent, this is really good information that these guys are providing. We want to keep doing it. So to help us, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications button. That way when we post something new, you'll get notified. Okay? I thank you in advance. Now, let's get back to the show. So man, there's so much to unpack here. Let's go back to adversity. Kid doesn't have a good day, but he's handling the adversity. Like, what's that look like to you? When you think of a kid handling the kind of adversity that he's dealing with, what's that look like? Yeah, demeanor on, let's say in the box or on the mound, right? Just the demeanor that goes into the at-bat, the demeanor that goes into the bad inning, where I just don't have my command that day. Maybe I'm on the mound, but are they carrying themselves with big body language? Are they throwing up their hands when the umpire doesn't give them the close call, right? Are they just, how do they go about it? And it doesn't mean, right, that those things, you can't be coached out of them. Yeah. But we do a lot. Obviously, we're out recruiting, but then on top of it, we love to go watch our commits. Yeah. Because I know if he, right, shows bad body language in our first inter-squad scrimmage at the end of September when he's a freshman, it's not going to go great for him. I've seen that in live action. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So we want to start to coach them along the way. Now, they're not our players, so we're careful not to step on the toes. But at the same point, I think every coach out there wants good body language, right? Step off the mound, take a deep breath, let's get back on the rubber, let's compete. And look, you may not have a good day. You may give up 4 runs in that inning and not have your command, and coach may come get you. How do you handle that with the coach, right? How does that interaction go? Do you get off the mound? Do you walk right by all your teammates that go out there to pick you up, and you just disregard the fact that they're doing that for you, right? You want to see, are they a great teammate? Can they be a great teammate in times of struggle and times of adversity? Because that's going to carry into your locker room. Right. And again, when we're recruiting players, we want 3 things. I try to keep it very simple. Talented players that we feel like can help us succeed. That's all different. Not everybody's a Friday night guy, but we feel like they fit how we knew things and what we need on that team next year. Are they committed to their academics? Doesn't mean you have to be a 4.0 student, but it does mean that you have to be willing to show up, go to class every day, sit in the front, interact with your professors, and do your work, do your best work. And if you do those things, it's pretty easy to feel like you'll be detail-oriented on the baseball field if you're detail-oriented in the classroom, because I've coached a lot of baseball players, and the large majority, the passion is a little bit more on the baseball side than it is the academics, not all of them, but so if you're detailed at something you don't love, it should be easy to be detailed on what you do. And then the third is that you're a good person. Yeah. And if we can get 40 guys in the clubhouse that are good guys, that are committed to their academics, and that are talented baseball players, we're going to be consistently successful. Does that mean Omaha? I hope every year. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you look at our track record for being consistent with results as one of the best programs in the country, I think we've had a lot of success with starting there, right? And if we can recruit players, now all the attributes and intangibles that we're talking about, they kind of fit into those things, right? So if you're
you're blowing off your teammates after a tough outing, it's hard to think that you're going to fit into that culture and that locker room, on any given day. So that would be maybe not the best thing to go about it. So those are the things we're looking for in the bad at bat. Umpire makes a bad call. Does he dig right back in and get in and realize we kind of have a saying, hey man, like you get a strike, the pitcher gets a strike, the umpire gets a strike. Coach Godwin says that all the time, right? So hey man, he missed his, he's human, and we're not going to react to it, because if you just go into the game and coach tells every recruit this, that hey, you're going to the umpires are not going to be great. Be surprised when they are.
I'm
know
always
what I mean?
amazed at the perfection people expect of umpires.
Sure.
Like, nobody else on the field's perfect. The coaches aren't, the players aren't.
That's right. That umpire's got to be right.
Focus on that?
Yeah, no question.
Hey, I want to go back to one other thing that you talked about, you touched on in the last 5 minutes of this segment, and that is relationships you have with programs. You talk a lot about referrals and how you find players. So, because we've got coaches listening to this that may have a talented player and they're not sure what to do or how this all works. And I want you to touch on, again, I try to keep this positive, but the negatives of people over-exaggerating. I'm sure you run into that. Where coaches are telling you the kid throws 92 and he throws 82.
Yeah.
The kid that runs a 6'8", but they told you he runs a 6'4". Because they want to promote their kids, but they over-promote them. So talk about the relationships and then that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the relationships are huge with what we do. I mean, it's arguably the most important thing as a recruiting coordinator, as an assistant baseball coach, is those relationships, because I think it's really important. The further you get into the relationships, not only is there the dialogue of, hey, Coach Palumbo, I have a player I think really fits your place. It's not just the transaction of the players. It's, do they fit?
Yeah.
And I kind of have a philosophy that I would rather pass on the right player than bring the wrong player into our program.
Right.
And does that happen? It does. We try to be patient and we try to develop the relationships with the players and the families in order to make an educated decision on they fit what we do. Because the reality is, it's not about what they post on where they're committed, what shirt or hat they get to wear, right, on their signing day. It's about when they arrive on campus for summer school or in the fall, is it going to work?
Yeah.
And are they going to enjoy themselves? And I have yet to meet a player, not many, that they show up, they're not prepared, they're not talented enough to really get onto the field there and be a part of the program. It doesn't mean you got to be a starter, it doesn't mean you got to be an everyday starter, but you're in the mix, right? And generally speaking, when you're not in the mix, the kids don't enjoy themselves. Right. And so if those recommendations are exaggerated, and maybe they're exaggerated and I show up and they do play well that day, but they've been exaggerated over time by a coach who's seen them all the time, and I just happen to catch him on his best day. We ultimately make a decision to bring him here. I'm not saying we would do this. We would like to see him play more, but the reality is that does happen, and then that player shows up on campus and he's not prepared to help that program. And now ultimately you look up, and in today's baseball culture, that's going to be the transfer portal, and now he's on to the next spot and he's kind of starting over again. And I just would advise coaches out there, just be very careful about yes, overselling, but continue to educate your players that you don't have to go to one of the top 10 teams in the country. You don't have to go to the ACC. You don't have to go to the SEC. There's a lot of players at all levels that got onto the field. They played early in their careers. They developed because of that. And ultimately they move on and reach a lot of their goals in professional baseball, if that is their goal. But you can achieve so many things.
So let's dig even deeper into the recruiting side. And this is where it gets a little tough, because I know you guys are positive thinkers. I'm positive thinkers too. But I always think about the things that kids are doing, or parents, that are kind of turnoffs to guys like you. And it's not that they're even being a jerk, or they're, there's obvious things that they could be doing, but I want to just explore some things that you see out there that you could categorize this. That kid doesn't even realize that this is not helping his cause.
Sure.
Do some things come to mind?
Yeah, I think really when we go out and watch a game, so I think there's a couple areas, right, where these things can kind of maybe rear their ugly head, so to speak, or right on the positive side too, right, where kids can kind of enhance your perception of them. And I think that is something I think parents and players need to recognize. We're always evaluating.
Everything matters, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
So, and I know this is crazy, but to the point of you show up and you watch a good player and he's 5'9", and you kind of look around and you're kind of checking it out, and well, who are mom and dad, right? Because in the past we had to recruit, you had to heavily recruit 15-year-olds, right? 14-year-olds.
Luckily, those days are sort of behind us.
That's right. That's right. So it started to evolve a little bit. But if you're recruiting a 15-year-old and he's 5'10", and then you look up and you meet mom and dad, and mom's 5'2", and dad's 5'10", you probably know, hey, he's going to be 5'10", right? But if you happen to see mom and dad and they're not 5'2" and 5'10", then maybe you got some room to grow, right? So all of these things, right, are crazy enough pieces to the puzzle a little bit. But how do they interact after a good game? How do they come out of the dugout when mom goes to give them a hug, right? How do they react? How do they respond? And you're just kind of watching, right, what goes into how they carry themselves.
So let me create a scenario. Game's over. Mom wants to give her son a hug, but he kind of brushes her off and kind of big leagues her.
Yeah.
You've got a profile of a player, and I'm guessing most of the kids that you like, they're really respectful to their parents.
That's right. I mean, you just want to kind of see what are these attributes that they, when maybe they don't know somebody's watching.
Yeah.
How do they carry themselves?
Right.
How do they act? And you can see that too, right? I mean, if they come on a visit, how do they interact with their parents?
Yeah.
Right? And you're just evaluating. Sometimes people think, hey, the visit is just for the player and the parents.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's for us to decide, hey, at the end of it, well, are we going to carry through with a scholarship offer that we had planned? Are we going to, we may love them and bump the scholarship offer, right? I mean, there's a lot of variables that could go into it, but really everything, we're watching, we're evaluating. We just want to see who you are.
What about parents? I mean, we haven't talked a lot about parents in this video, but have you seen things that are red flags that parents do?
100%. I mean, same thing, right? They're at the games.
Yeah.
How are they carrying themselves?
Yeah.
Right? Are they yelling at coach? Right? If and this has happened to me in the past where I was there to watch a player pitch in Fort Myers, and he was a relief pitcher. And so, as every scout knows, relief pitchers are if they're not a starter, it's hard to figure out in those tournaments when are they going to throw, right? So, and when the teams are playing to win, they use them when they need to. So I'm sitting there and I go to a game. Doesn't pitch, show up the next day at their game, doesn't pitch, show up the next game. We're about 3-4 games into this. We're getting down to Sunday, right, at Fort Myers, and everybody's heading out of town in the fall, and I'm just kind of hanging on, trying to see him before the flight takes off. But I've been kind of talking with this one gentleman for, he happens to be next to me back behind home plate, hoping he comes in the game, and so we're talking. Turns out he was the father of the young man I was there to watch the entire time.
And you didn't know it?
Had no idea. Had no idea.
That's a good sign, right?
Well, right. I actually never found it out in that tournament, right?
Wow.
I watched him pitch, made her, and then he, kind of got brought to my attention that we had talked a bunch. So, but right, taking away those conversations, I walked out of there and I'm like, it shows me a lot that he didn't introduce himself.
Exactly.
And he just was having normal dialogue, and we were getting to know each other a little bit, unbeknownst to myself at the time, but it just general conversation. But those are things that I knew who he was.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time talking to parents throughout the process because, generally speaking, the kids are going to be a reflection of who their parents are.
Do you find have you run into many parents kind of doting and bragging on their kids?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, plenty.
I mean, me running a travel program, I ran into it. I used to say to him, just stop pitching me on your son because I can evaluate
him. That's right. It's almost like you're, you don't respect my evaluation.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Or you need to compensate for something, that maybe he's not that good, but you're going to fabricate stuff.
Sure. And generally speaking, that's not only a turnoff, but if sometimes you run into a hard part where you really enjoy the kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the parents are the ones that are making it harder on their child, and you hope that as they get maybe a little bit further away, come into your culture, that maybe we can start to. But it does become a challenge. It doesn't always work, and I've seen it go both ways with that a little bit. But my advice to parents would just be, we can evaluate. We can evaluate, and I really would advise your sons to carry themselves in a great manner, be a great teammate. When you interact with coaches, look them in the eyes, right? Shake their hand firm, have the conversation, have the dialogue. I literally just got off the phone yesterday with a player, and I got off the phone and I looked at the other coaches on staff, and I'm like, I've not seen him play. He was recommended to me, but he is a confident kid. He spoke very well to me. He initiated parts of the conversation, right? It wasn't one-word answers, right? And so I walked out of there and he stood out to me, right? He stood out to me, and now I'm going to try to figure out a way. He's pretty far away from here, but I'm trying to figure out a way to go see him, strictly because of how he carried himself on the phone. And those phone calls are very important, and we take a lot away from those. And I'll give you an example. A turnoff for me is when I get on the phone with a kid and I say, hey, how was the game? And the first thing they go into is how they hit or how they pitched. And they completely leave out, did we win or lose the game? Right. And so to me, it just goes to show a very small thing of a little bit more self-absorbed, a little bit less team culture. Right. And so again, it's not the end-all be-all. None of these things are end-all be-alls. Right. But I'll quickly follow up with, but did you win? Yeah. Because if you went 0 for 3, then that's okay. We can work through that. But maybe if we were more team-oriented, we may have gone 2 for 3. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, those are things that you just kind of look for as you're navigating at the games and dealing with families and getting a chance to be on the phone with them. But I always try to speak with parents at length about who we are, what our expectation is, when they come on a visit, what to expect, and kind of lay out for them those foundational things that we talk about. And I tell them, every call, I tell them, look, there is a lot of talk about fit, right? It's kind of the buzzword that goes around recruiting. And fit for us is we evaluate talented players, right, that can help us win. They're committed to their academics, and they are good people. Yeah. Now, as we navigate in these talks and these visits, and I watch them, that's what I'm trying to figure out, and coaches and the rest of our staff, does that fit our place? Fit for every family is different. Right. And this is where this is y'all's job to navigate. Come spend time with us. Let's have these dialogue. Let's have this dialogue. Let's have these conversations. And if after all of this, I kind of think about it as a pyramid, right? We're here, they're there. As you start to grow and see and get to know each other, and you start to lay out all these things that are expectations, and they get here and they decide it's the right fit for them based upon what they know, we've already done our evaluations if we're at the scholarship, portion of the conversation. Right. And so if we kind of come together, and then generally speaking, right, they get here, they know what to expect, they know how we're going to coach them, how we're going to interact with them, that they're going to be held accountable, that they're going to have to go to class, and if they don't turn in their work on time, they're going to sit while everybody else is practicing in Coach Gowan's office. They're going to complete their work, and hopefully we learn pretty quickly and don't have to do that a whole lot. But it's important to get those things out there, and that they fit what we do, and that we fit what they want. Right.
Well, my brother has a term, it's called mutual mystification, and it's when two parties don't understand what you're talking about, which leads to disastrous transfer portal and things like that. So you're creating, your profile. You're trying to get those people to understand what the profile is. That's right. I always go back to the parents and the travel ball coaches and the high school coaches. In fact, I wrote an article one time, the 14 biggest differences between travel baseball and Division I baseball. And as I was writing the article, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry because it was so striking. And so as a owner of a travel program for many years, I always thought, no, let's just run it the way, the guys at ECU are running it. That way these kids are getting prepared. But it starts at home. For sure. If these kids are not disciplined, if they're not respectful, if they're not other-centered in many ways, or on their team, their coaches are allowing things to happen, that won't fly here, they're not doing them any favors. They're actually getting them scratched off lists. So, let's just talk about travel baseball in our closing minutes here. Would you say, how would you balance high school baseball and travel baseball from a recruiting standpoint?
Yeah, so I think to your point, right, it's again, and we're always looking at it from the perspective of who fits at East Carolina. I think a broader picture is, how could you fix some of those other things in travel baseball or high school programs, right? Because there are fantastic travel coaches and travel organizations, and there are fantastic high school organizations. There are some that aren't as good in both sides as well. And I think for us, it's identifying what programs are like ours. Yeah. What are the closest, right? Whether it's not, and it usually obviously starts at the top, and that's why the program is close to how we operate on a daily basis. And so you're always going to start with those programs. And, as we talked earlier, right, there's times where I have a little bit of a window in recruiting, and I'm going to go watch a game. I don't need to see a specific player in that in that session, but I'm going to go find one of those organizations that I just appreciate how they play the game. Their kids, right, you can tell they coach them, they hold them accountable, right? They miss a cutoff. They don't scream at them for miss. I want to know, like, do y'all ever practice that? Right? Because now you're holding a player accountable for something that you may not even practice or have spoken to them about, right? So, to me, that's what coaching is that your players are prepared, and if they don't have, right, they don't execute something specifically, well, they've been coached on it. Now we're going to hold them accountable, and then we're going to get back to coaching it, right, when we get an opportunity on the practice field or pregame or what have you. But, to me, it's holding those kids accountable for playing the game the right way, playing hard, playing with passion, running on and off the field. The other things will take care of themselves. We've gone through a little bit of a tough stretch here, and it's been neat to hear our players talk about, we are so consistently good because we do the small things consistently. Right. And so let's not get caught up in trying to get a win. Let's get caught up in, right, getting on the field, getting off the field, having energy and enthusiasm in the dugout, right, in between innings, being clean with our catch play, doing all the pregame has energy. BP, we're flying around, infield, outfield. We're not just, hey man, throwing the ball around. We're moving our feet. We're holding each other accountable for getting the baseball around the horn. When you get a fly out in the outfield in the game, get the baseball in, get it back in the pitcher's hands so we can play with tempo, right? All of these things that we have worked on since August, right? And now, right, we're into when it matters. Right. We're into, right, we're in a great spot in our season, right? We've fallen a little bit of adversity, and we got to get back to doing the things that make us successful, not getting caught up with the end result. Right. And so, those are the things that when I go out and watch games, I want to see coaches hold their players more accountable for. Make them warm up and play catch and be clean. Hit them in the chest, move their feet. How do you expect to field a ground ball, the guy going down the line, and get him to hit him in the chest when he couldn't do it out in left field getting ready before the game, right? So those are the things, right, that you want to look for.
Let me ask you a question about that. And you've been doing this a long time. You're not old, but you started so early. Now, and I'll put you on the spot. Do you see any trends, good or bad, with what we're talking about, from way back when you started watching players to now? Is it the same, or do you see trends?
Yeah, I would say I see some trends of, in my opinion, it's working the wrong direction. I don't think there's enough accountability. I don't think kids are being held accountable to play the game at the level that's preparing them for the next level, whatever level that may be. Yeah. And so for me, there are still great organizations. There are still tremendous high school coaches, but I've seen those become less and less. And you've seen more, when I say less and less, at the high level of how they hold their kids accountable. I think there's actually more and more programs, which is part of the issue, right?
That's what I was going to say. When everybody, when I started 17, 18 years ago, it really was kind of like elite travel baseball. Right. We would come down and play, 6, 8 top-notch programs. There'd be 40 Division I schools there because these 8 programs were just filled with talent. That was the travel baseball I started into. But then everybody started traveling, and now you got tournaments with 380 teams. Right. But I wanted to touch on that too. When you go to these gigantic, let's finish today talking about this summer, because there's some points in there I wanted to talk about. You're going to be out and about all summer long, right? Sure. Do you kind of have your places where you're going to go every year? I mean, and how do you pick those places?
That's right. Yeah. So I think exactly like you touched on. There's certain tournaments where there's so many teams, right?
Yeah,
you're talking about the WWBAs down in Marietta, and you're talking about some of the PBR events there at Lake Point and Futures games, right? You got a couple hot spots, right, where you're going to go because there are so many good players in one area, and it's bang for your buck.
Yeah.
But you're also going to have side trips where it's. But I really liked this kid. Maybe I saw him right in Marietta, but now he's shooting over to Charleston to play next weekend, and I want to follow up on that because I feel like he's fitting all of the things right that we value here at East Carolina, and you might to kind of deviate from some of those plans. So for us, obviously we have you talk about recruiting coordinator. It's not only you out recruiting and doing that, but you're also coordinating some of the other coaches right on staff and trying to get them to fit all these pieces to the puzzle. So there's so many events where there are good players. It's a matter of how do you navigate those, right? And so certainly have our hot spots that we're gonna hit up, right? Here in North Carolina with the state games, right? That's a staple. You got all the different 8 regions are gonna get together, and there's a lot of great players. So we're gonna be there. We're gonna be in some of those other ones that we mentioned. But yeah, that's part of the game, so to speak, of trying to figure out where you want to go and how that relates to other people that you're recruiting against and how you want to navigate each guy. Obviously, with some of the rule changes in recruiting now, you're kind of balancing out, maybe you have in the summertime, you have a couple pieces that you feel like you need to go get out of the transfer portal. Every program's a little bit different in that capacity, but you might have some visits back on campus when you're supposed to be in Atlanta, right? So you're trying to navigate all of these pieces to the puzzle to try to put the best, get the most out of that time in the summer to set yourself up for success next year, but also the future.
Right. Well, the point I take out of that, there's nothing random about what you're doing. Now, you could occasionally see a kid, you went to see him and saw this kid, you could call that random. But I think there's people that think they're going to go down to the WWBA and play, and they're just college coaches just sitting there just watching baseball.
Yeah,
it doesn't really work that way, does it?
I can tell you, so rarely has that ever happened where you just show up and just to show up, right? We're so busy now. There's so many options.
Yeah.
Right. It used to be there were a handful, like you said, back 15 years ago. That you knew this tournament was good. Okay, well, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to pick the brains of the coaches that are there and kind of figure out, hey, do you have a handful of players on this roster that might fit our place, and now I'll sit there and watch them. But for the most part now, it's recommendations, right? Going into a tournament that, hey, this program has a couple players that we've reached out, we've had some dialogue about, and now we're going to go watch that game. So very infrequently does it happen where you just show up at a park. Now, every now and then, right, when you're at Lake Point and you're watching a game, and all of a sudden you see up there on the board that, hey, here's a left-hander throwing the baseball 86-88, and he's on the younger side and looks like a great frame, you may pop over, and then you may kind of dive into it a little bit. But by and large, it's all based upon kind of recommendation where we need to go, and it's very, very valuable time for us, and we're trying to balance out, right, where do we need to be to get the best things for the program and make sure we're putting ourselves in the best position to make good decisions. And on top of that, we're also husbands and fathers, and right to where we're not just going to go. We want to make sure we're putting in quality time when we're out and we're evaluating and we're recruiting, and summer is a huge piece of that and a huge chunk of that, but you also want to make sure you're using your time wisely.
Coach, it's unbelievable how fast this time goes by. You got players coming in here. You're going to practice. I'm looking forward to watching you practice. Hopefully get a chance to say hi to Coach Godwin.
Absolutely.
But I can't thank you enough. This talk is, if people they should be taking notes, writing everything down, watch it multiple times, because you could take this conversation, all the information that you've shared, and say, okay, now I have a roadmap. Mom and Dad, now you have a roadmap. Players, you have a roadmap, because Coach just laid it out for you. Just tremendous information, years of experience. What matters, what doesn't matter. So I can't thank you enough.
No, I appreciate you having me on. And I think as coaches, right, you're always worried about the future of baseball. and you're always worried about, hey, can it be better moving forward? And I think we've talked about, there's so many great coaches out there, so many great high schools, so many great travel coaches. But this information, the more they can kind of take this and utilize it, and I think not only will it help the kids develop, but it will help them be more prepared for the future. So I appreciate you doing this. Awesome stuff, and thanks for having me be a part.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A lot of continued success here.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
Okay.